Gentlemen, welcome to the first of two May meetings of the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. We will follow our usual procedure this evening, which is we will take the items in the order in which they appear on the agenda. We will ask the appellant to come forward and be sworn in and seated in the chairs to my right and offer whatever information he or she would like us to have. We ask them to confine their testimony, if at all possible, to a 10-minute interval. Following that, we will ask the appellant to step down, and we will solicit testimony from anyone in the audience who is in favor of the appeal, and then anyone in the audience who is in opposition to the appeal. We ask that the audience members confine themselves, if at all possible, to a 5-minute presentation. Following that portion of the hearing, we will check in with code enforcement to see if there's any information from their office, and then, if information has been offered that appears to justify factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification, not new arguments, prior to our closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. In most cases, the board will act on each case before moving on to the next one. The first item on the agenda tonight, I should mention there is one item on the agenda tonight which will not be heard. It's been withdrawn. That is case 0149-2024, Highland Street, 652-Z38, Neighborhood Residential District. That case will not be heard tonight. So if you are here for that case, you need not stay. The first item on the agenda is a request for rehearing. Those we treat a little differently from what I just described, in that the board typically does not take new testimony. We rely on a written submission, which we did receive, and the criteria, rather than being the criteria for a variance or a special exception, are that the board needs to find that we made either an error in law, an error in procedure, or that new information had arisen that was not available at the time of the hearing, which is germane to our decision. Has everyone had a chance to read the submission on 30 River Road, which is 0148-2024, who are requesting a rehearing, open space residential district?
Yes.
All right. I beg your pardon?
Briefly.
Okay. All right. Mr. Davey, why don't we start with you? Did you see anything in the submission that caused you to think that we had made an error or that there was significant new information?
I did read it, but I admittedly I'm still digesting it. It was kind of a lot. So I guess not.
Okay. Mr. Monahan.
Yeah, I did review it. I did not see any errors of new information or obvious errors that we've made. There was a reference to the notice of decision provides that written findings of fact are to be available within 5 business days required, and I just can't follow the timeline in it, but I don't think it's a procedural error. But
Okay.
I found that part of the request for rehearing confusing.
Mr. Winters.
Yes, I read it. We can't summarize the entire because it was a pretty lengthy submission, but I think they were arguing, number one, that they didn't need a variance. I think that argument was made at the hearing. It was considered in detail, and in fact, it was brought to our attention that we need to make that determination anytime it's raised, even if it's not raised as an appeal. And so we did consider that, and we decided they do need a variance. And as far as the substance of it, I think there's a record of the hearing, of course, but I think our ultimate conclusion just wasn't in the character of the neighborhood. And here in this request, they speak quite a bit about the 2 prior variances we granted, somehow kind of suggesting that because we had granted 2 before, and this is essentially just a logical extension of the 2 we already granted, that we kind of locked into granting this one too. It was almost a formality, but I don't agree with that. I think we considered it on its merits and found that this additional second floor really is out of character with the neighborhood. So I'm just saying all that to kind of further support our decision, because I don't think there's anything new raised here.
Yeah, I remember when when we made the decision on this, and I don't feel like there were any errors made the first time we heard it. I thought we were pretty thorough. We listened to everything carefully, and
Very good. I agree with my colleagues. Is there anyone who would care to make a motion?
I'll move that we deny the motion for rehearing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
So, I'm sorry, one other quick, sort of more of a question, I guess, for anyone who might know. On the issue that Jim mentioned about the notice of they say the notice of decision must provide written findings of fact within 5 business days. And I believe that, I don't know if that's a relatively new statute, but we started doing that maybe within the last year, and we do provide the written notice. Is that, do you know about that 5 business days? Is there anything to that?
We hit those targets
We
on a
do.
monthly basis. I'd have to look at the date in
Yeah.
that case. I did not research it.
Yeah. So we don't have full, I mean, we rely on the city to do that, but, you know, we do provide the written notice, and to our knowledge, it was within 5 days. Sorry.
Good.
So yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The the request for rehearing is denied. That will bring us to the next case, which is case 0161, 2024, 10 Ferry Street, OCP, Opportunity Corridor Performance District, Flatley Concord Center, LLC. The applicant wishes to install a 220-square-foot sign with a 22-foot horizontal dimension. Variances would be required from Article 2869A, Table of Maximum Sign Dimensions in non-residential districts, to allow 200 square feet of signage where 100 square feet is allowed, and Article 2869C, permitted freestanding signs, to allow a 22-foot wide sign where 16 feet is allowed.
Good evening.
Good evening, Master William. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but?
Yes, I do.
Is there a sign-up sheet up there? If you would jot your name on that and also identify yourself for the record as you testify, please.
And for the record, my name is Kevin Walker. I'm with the John Flatley Company.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just for an overview real quick. This is a similar a case that you all heard. It was originally approved in April of '22 after a couple delays for clarification of what was happening, but all his variances that he's asking for now were previously approved. They couldn't put the sign where it was located, and I'm going to speak for you a little bit, Kevin, but because it was landed on top of an easement on top of a sewer pipe. So they came to us and said, we have to move it. We weren't sure they were moving it to, so we decided that they really probably should come back to make sure you, the board, were comfortable with where this new sign was going, though it's the exact same sign, and I'll let Kevin take over from here.
All right. It sounds, Mr. Walker, like the issue for you to address with this, first and foremost, is where you want to put the sign.
Okay, yeah, so but the previous colleague that worked for us, not sure why, but didn't have utilities or easements or that type of thing shown on the plan. When we took a closer look at it, it's in the middle of a sewer easement. And as a matter of fact, where the sign was going to be placed is just right on top of a sewer manhole. So that wasn't going to work out very well. So I looked at a couple of different options. Moving it behind the dumpsters, we wouldn't be able to fit the sign. It wouldn't meet the offset to the property line. We'd need an extra variance for that. So what we did is we just slid it a little bit closer to Senator Stiles Bridges Highway. We meet the setback on that side yard, and the sign is facing the direction we'd like to put it. So essentially, we're just sliding the sign out of the easement. I did attempt a couple times, just discussing with the folks over at the sewer department. Can we stick it in the sewer, within the easement, obviously not over the sewer line, and they would just rather not have anything in the easement, which I completely understand. But we were able to slide it, meet the zoning requirement as far as setback, and other than that, everything else about the sign is identical to what was previously approved.
you point out to us on the map where it was and where it's going?
Sure, where it was. Right in here, so
Yep.
this is the sewer. Sewer easement runs from here to here.
Right.
And somewhere right in here, there's actually a sewer manhole. It was basically right in this area, so it basically took it and just split it maybe 15 feet or so.
Now it'll be where?
So, kind of tough to see, but there's the length of it there, but
Oh,
it's
okay.
facing the roadway. And the setback is about 8.5 feet off of the property line, which meets the required setback.
So it's
Okay.
still going to be facing 202?
Yes,
And the contents and the size are all the same?
everything's identical.
If I remember, there's a couple of go-arounds on this request the original time because the folks at the Kimball Jacobs estate, they didn't really, I think they objected initially and then you guys sort of discussed with them. They came around to sort of reaching a compromise or that they were happy with. I mean, do you know this time around, have they been in touch with you at all?
No, I haven't had any contact.
Okay.
Just if I recall when there was a point where the executive director for the Campbell Jenkins Estates came in and reported to us that she was fine with the final design. She appreciated the impact, the input that they had, and she did not intend to return.
Okay, and there shouldn't be any reason why this change the location should make the risk. Yeah. Okay.
Is that a sewer line or a stormwater drain?
Sewer.
Sewer.
Any other questions from the board? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
That's pretty much the short story.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Is there anyone who'd like to be heard either in favor or in opposition to this appeal? Is there any comment from code enforcement?
No, sir, thank you.
That will close the public testimony portion of the hearing, and I will invite my colleagues to discuss the case. Starting with Ms. Perkins, how does this look to you?
I don't see an issue with it. I mean, he's just trying to comply with the change because of the sewer line. Everything else was already previously approved, so I don't see a reason to go against that.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, my recollection is the primary basis for the variance before was the unusual shape of the property being very long and thin, so to speak, and also the height that, trying to comply with the ordinance, they wouldn't be able to really get any observation of the sign. So it was just, we had a bit of a question about it being on 202, but we had resolved that before, so I think the same reasoning should apply here.
I agree with my colleagues. I agree.
As do I. Would anyone care to make a motion to reaffirm our approval of the variances 1 and 2?
I would move to approve both of those variances.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. You're good to go.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome. The next case this evening is case 0167, 2024, 2 Home Avenue, OCP, Opportunity Corridor Performance District. WB4 LLC are the owners. The owners would like to construct a wall sign that would exceed the quantity and dimensions allowed on the site. The variances would be required from Article 28695, signs where 3 are allowed, and 210 square feet.
Chris, do you want me on or not? I just was gonna be late, that was the only.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Why don't you have a seat?
For the record, we just need to state which alternate will not be hearing.
Okay.
Will not be voting, please.
All right,
You can make it me.
okay. We'll
Yeah.
switch back and forth.
And I don't care, yeah. It's up
Oh,
to
make
you.
her- make-
I'll
make-
pipe up if I have comments.
No, you can have comments, it's just who can
Yeah.
vote.
I'm not
Right.
worried that we won't hear from you. Okay,
I should just,
so Mr. Wallner will be joining the fray here. And we, you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you.
Yeah.
Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify, as well as signing in on the sign-in sheet?
My name is Josh Messenger. I'm with Advantage Signs.
I'm Erin Lambert. I'm a senior
Vice President with Wilcox and Barton, who is a co-owner, or co-occupant of the building at 2 Home Avenue.
What would you like us to know?
So what we're asking for today, or tonight, is the channel letters on the Hall Street side of the sign, or the building. Right now, we currently have no identifying signs on that side of the building, and it's gonna be difficult for people to find, Wilcox and Barton, as most of the signage is for 2 Home Fitness, on the building. And there's also another component to this for the window clings that are currently on the building. The way I understand it is that one of the window clings has been permitted, but the other one would need to file for a variance on that, and that should be in your packet as well.
I see Wilcox and Barton sign. I don't see any other sign. Am I missing a piece of the puzzle here?
I can pass this around if that helps.
That's the image we have.
You have this image?
Yeah.
Right, so
Am I the only one, or just,
which
No,
image are you
that's all
looking at? Right, so that's the image they presented to us, but it goes on both ends of the building.
Oh.
So they, actually, they're allowed 3 signs on their frontage. They're allowed a total square footage for the whole building. They're asking for a variance for a 4th sign in the front, and when they put these what do you call the end, not the end caps, but the
this-
the
yeah,
building
on the-
signs on, that's gonna bring them over their square footage. So that's why they need the 2 variances.
Okay, so the first one's to allow for the 4th sign, or,
In the front, correct.
but we don't have a picture of that sign or where it goes on the building.
I don't know if they gave us one or not, sorry.
Do you have one?
You have it right there.
it actually says 5 signs
That's
where
on the
3 are
edge.
allowed?
That's it right there.
But which one's going in the window that you just
Oh,
talked
I'm
about?
sorry, I have it right here.
That's the one I don't think I received,
Oh,
sorry.
okay. So we pass this one around.
So it's just the side lights that are the window perf.
Oh, the side, these here?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, they
all right.
wrapped
So
around.
these 2 graphics,
But you have
Two
frontage
homes.
on both homes and Hall?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, so the property is unique in that it really has frontage on 2 properties, but it has visibility on 3 because it also has visibility from the highway. So one thing that's consistent with this corridor is that people have some kind of a pedestal sign on the street, which we have and have permitted, but then, to provide wayfinding once you come onto the site. So we need our guests, both for 2 Home 2 Home Fitness and for Wilcox and Barton, to turn on Home Avenue and then find the door. And so we went for many months. We actually moved into the space in January. We went for many months trying to understand, how people will get to us and find us. So it's really important for us to have the pedestal sign because it draws the clients in. If you're new to 2 Home Fitness, if you're coming to try a class, meet with a trainer. But then you have to turn, and then so we also have a sign over the door. And then the frontage or the signs at the ends of the building also provide some wayfinding. Help our customers find the building and find the appropriate doors.
One goes toward 93 and the other goes toward Hall Street.
Exactly.
So wait, how many occupants are there in the building?
There's 2. So about 3/4 of the building is 2 Home Fitness, and then about 1/4 of the building is Wilcox and Barton, which is civil and environmental engineering.
So you each have 2? So where's the, you
So
each,
there's 2 signs that are permitted on the face of the building that faces 93.
oh, what you just showed us, the 2
And
on
then
each?
2 Home Ave is prominently over the door. And what we would like to do is on the Hall Street side of the building, put Wilcox and Barton. Because then as our clients approach, they know we're in the building. All the other wayfinding we're doing inside the building to avoid adding more signage. So once a customer comes in the door, they'll see a sign to find us on the 2nd floor. But we've had a number of people come and just feel like, oh, I got the wrong directions, I've arrived, it's 2 Home Fitness. We want them to know we're also there.
So the 5th sign is the actual street number. You're saying they, sorry,
There's
You're-
2 signs on the east side that face the highway.
that are for the fitness club.
One is Wilcox and Barton and one's the fitness club on
Okay.
on the east side. 2 Home is over the door, which is in the center of the property if you're coming on from Home Avenue.
And it just says 2 Home,
It
that's
just
just
says
the
2
address
Home.
of the building,
Yeah.
not specific to
It's
each
actually
center.
also the name of the club. So 2 Home Fitness, I apologize for the confusion. Two Home Fitness is the name of the business. Two Home
And the
Avenue
address.
is our address.
So there's 3 total signs for the fitness club.
Correct.
So these two on the door, we're calling that two signs, two separate signs. Okay.
Yeah, and we didn't know that when we bought the signs. They were installed by somebody other than our current sign consultant. So those were there. We didn't, we were told they weren't signs. They are. We're here before you tonight.
So is part of the problem with the wayfinding or the lack of clarity that you're there, that the fitness club kind of dominates the signage, and so people think the whole building, they might logically think because it's a fitness club and they have so much signage, the building is for them?
Yeah, there's nothing for if someone's driving down Hall Street or even when they turn onto Two Home Ave to see any kind of Wilcox and Barton signage. And so that's why we're hoping to put it on the Hall Street side.
Who owns the building?
WB4 LLC. So they basically own businesses.
Just as a commercial property?
Yeah, commercial
Okay.
property. Yeah, that owns both businesses.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
No,
What's,
sorry.
just real quick, I was curious what the size difference was. Because I didn't catch how much extra square footage of signage.
Yeah,
I could
so-
see the need for it, but
That would have been a good question for me to have in there for you, sorry.
that's okay.
I mean, what the size, permitted size is?
Permitted size versus what they need.
So they're, all building signs should not exceed 150 square feet, and they'll end up with 210
Oh,
square
okay.
feet. I did have it on the memo, sorry.
It is actually down there, sorry.
Okay, so they're 60 over.
Correct.
Okay, all right,
Sorry, can I ask one more question?
of course.
Could Two Home give up one of their signs? I mean, no, you won't want to ask them that, but realistically, to comply, I mean, or to do 4 signs instead of 3, why do they need 3 signs?
I guess one of the part of the thinking was it consistent with the neighborhood is that they have advertising or wayfinding on the highway side, the east side, and then the one we have over the door is really the Two Home Fitness. That's how you find the door. So we've got the 2 co-tenants on the east side, and we'd like to just have Wilcox Barton on the west.
They would still need a variance. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's 3 allowed.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
For 4, right.
You know what this building is, right? The old gold, yeah.
Yeah, Memorial, I know
Yeah,
roughly where
Gold's
it is.
Gym, 43 North, yeah.
Did you?
Where's the self-storage going?
All right. Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
No, thank you.
With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have a request for a total of, was it 4 signs? Or 3 are allowed, or 5 or 4 are allowed, or however many you want?
5 or 3.
Five.
5 or 3 are allowed, okay, as well as an additional 60 square feet of signage. I'm going to start this one with Mr. Wallner. Since you're tardy, you're up.
Since I was late. Well, I think the unusual characteristic of this whole stretch here is the fact that they have basically 2 frontages to two streets, and I think I'm persuaded by the hardship argument that they have one of the narrowest lots, and thereby don't have the same advantage of visibility to the passing public. So I would be probably in favor of supporting their request.
Mr. Davy?
Agree.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that given the shared entrance for the 2 businesses, the additional signage will help with the public finding what they're looking for.
Okay. Mr. Winters?
I'm kind of on the fence, although I think I'm going to agree, but I'll say my reluctance is that I feel it's flirting with kind of a self-created hardship because they've already got, it's almost like they need enough signage to distinguish themselves from the existing tenant, but the building as a whole, but I do see the unique character of the property, And it is a little unfair to punish a new incoming tenant for the signs of the existing tenant. So I'll agree.
The one thing I can say, if it helps you at all, is 2 to 3 of those signs, they're way over here. The only building that really looks at them is gonna be like the building right across that tiny little nowhere street.
Right, so
Not
what-
really gonna be seen from them. It's so that
Right,
once people
exactly.
pull into the parking lot, they'll know they're at the right building. It's really not going to impede people going down the road.
You think that the people on the tiny little nowhere street are going to feel the same way about it?
Yeah, because I've been there in that side building, it's parking lot. It's not entrances, it's mostly parking lot, so.
The address is 2 Nowhere Street?
2 Nowhere Street.
Yeah. Very good.
It's a sensitive subject in that neighborhood.
Yeah. Did everybody have a chance to speak while I was being a wiseacre? Very good.
I'm overtired.
I am also inclined to grant. I think that the site is definitely unique, well, not unique, but there are characteristics of the site that create a hardship in this case, including the fact that one of the views of the building is from an interstate highway. Would anyone care to make a motion?
So moved.
Is, I move approval of both
Yes.
variances. Is there a second?
I'll second.
The photo finish on that.
Yeah.
Mr. Winters, I think, won by a hair. Any discussion?
Did you give a chance to open it to the public?
Oh, right.
Oh, did I skip that altogether?
I thought you did.
No, I thought he
No,
asked.
No, I
He
did.
asked.
Okay.
You
Okay.
tried.
Okay.
You're gaslighting me, aren't you? You turned fool. He's fading up here, he really is. But he doesn't know it yet. All right. We had a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variances are granted. You're welcome. Ms. Perkins, do you want to bat on this one?
Swapping back and forth, do you care?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Davy, do you mind staying in the dugout for this one?
So not Brendan.
Thank you very much.
We should look and see which one it was first, to see if I was pulling you in.
Is Highland Street being,
Highland Street was withdrawn.
oh, it's withdrawn, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it.
So this is 7,
North State Street, 01727 North State Street, CVP Civic Performance District, Bay State Recovery Services LLC. The owners would like to construct a freestanding sign that would exceed setback limitations for corner lots in Article 2867E. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but.
I do.
And do you maintain the same identity you did when you were here before?
Yes.
Very good.
So this is a property at 7 North State Street, and the sort of unique situation with this property is that it's on a corner lot, and the sign needs a variance because it is on a corner lot, and I believe it's 30 feet from an intersection. So the property where the road
Here, can I help you?
Oh, sure, yeah.
The GIS is up there now for you.
Yeah, so that's Blake Street. So that's a one-way street. You'd be turning left onto Blake Street. So there would be no impeding sight or line of sight from if someone was traveling down Blake Street, which you can't do on a one-way street, looking left. The sign might block it, but since everyone's turning left onto Blake Street, and it's a one-way street, there's no impediment of vision, and that's something that makes the property unique. I understand where the ordinance is written, or how the ordinance is written for two-way traffic, but I don't really see that this is a need for it on a one-way street.
Am I reading this picture correctly, that there was a sign before in approximately the same location?
I believe so, yeah.
There appears to be a sign post with no sign on it.
Yeah. I believe it was a single post with a hanging bracket. Yeah, that's what I believe it was.
So, do you know, it says exceed the setback limitations, do you know by how much? Is it the same setback limitations as for the structure itself? Is that the rule?
I don't know exactly by how much.
Because it looks like, I mean, the building is obviously in the setback, and,
Right.
I mean, you wouldn't put inside anything else, I don't know where else you would put it, but in the setback, right?
Yeah, I think it's on an elevated area where it's trying to go, and it's in a landscaped area that
I assume you don't want to put it in the backyard.
right.
So I'm looking at two images of what look like the same thing, but one's with a white background and a logo, and one's black without a logo.
Yeah.
Which are we putting in?
It's with the white background. They went through multiple iterations
Okay,
of their.
so this one's not actually what
It'd be the white one.
the white one is. Okay, so the white sign with the logo is the one that they're looking to put in.
Correct.
Okay. I was getting confused if there was
I know.
two separate signs.
Yeah, they have like 5.
Two different back, one on front and one on back.
No,
Blake Street is one way headed east or west?
I believe west.
West.
Yeah, west.
So no one's.
So you're
putting-
never coming out of the street at that end?
Right.
Okay.
But do you know where, is it, typically when we grant a setback variance, it's usually for a structure itself, but I guess it could be for a sign, we say how much into the setback we're gonna allow, I mean,
Mhm.
do you know where it's gonna, I mean,
Um,
because we can only grant as much relief as necessary, I mean, you're not gonna put it right, literally inch away, right?
no, it kind of depicts on the drawing where the sign location is going to go, and
That
I'm
looks-
sure we could take
Oh, I see.
measurements off the GIS site.
That looks to be a couple feet back from the brick.
Yeah, I would say between 3 and 5 feet set back from the brick.
From the
on-
property line.
Yeah, from the property line on either direction, I would say.
Because the property line's technically before, like, the sidewalk. From the edge of the sidewalk there, is that, am I looking?
No,
at
I
this?
think the brick wall you're looking at is his
The-
property line.
Right, that's what I mean.
Right
like,
to the
there's
sidewalk is the property line,
line's the brick
And he's supposed to
wall.
have a
Okay.
setback, that he's not supposed to have
Yeah.
any structures, as
So that's
Mr.
where the
Winters
sidewalks,
announced.
the setback starts.
the building's
yeah.
probably in the setback.
Oh, I
Pre-existing
see, you put it
non-conforming.
here. Oh, right.
And it's
okay.
gonna face, North State Street, not
Yes.
go sideways?
Yeah, we discussed that with the client, and he wanted to be parallel with North State Street.
Okay.
So to be conforming, the sign would probably have to be inside the building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see the downside to that.
Well, it'd be, even if you were coming down Blake, taking a left, it'd be less impeding of vision facing North State Street than it would be if it was, that's why I was asking that.
Yeah.
But you're not, and so even if that were to change later, it wouldn't matter.
Mhm.
So well, ask you, code enforcement's gonna answer, is the size of the sign conforming?
Yes, it's 12 square feet, I believe.
And did you explore, well, any signage in the front of the building would have been non-conforming, even if you hung something on the post that was there?
Right.
Okay.
So this is for Mr. Hall, if we grant this just based on the way it's written, I mean, are you comfortable with that? Because it doesn't really say where in the
You can
setback.
certainly condition it to say a minimum of 3 feet away from the property line.
That'll work for you?
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions from the board? Anything else you'd like us to know?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Sir.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request for a sign within the front yard setback. We heard testimony that any sign that's going to be visible from the street is going to be in the front yard setback because of the placement of the existing building. Start this with Ms. Perkins.
I'm fine with it. I don't see any reason to deny it. He doesn't really have a choice but to get a variance in order to have a sign. There was previously a sign there, and everything else is in compliance.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, the location of the building itself is justification for it, because the only sign that can go in the front area is in the setback, and then when, you know, and then it's just a matter of where within it. You don't want to have it too close to the building, because that doesn't, just aesthetically doesn't look good. So I think where he indicated is good. I would just say we should say, based on the applicant's representation, that should be more, no more than 3 feet into the setback.
Yes, that too.
Mr. Monahan?
I agree with McConk's.
Same with me.
And I also agree. Anyone care to make a motion?
I'd move to approve, based on the condition that the applicant will put it, no closer than 3 feet from the property line.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is approved. You're welcome.
Yeah,
Shall we switch off again?
sure.
Sure. Well, you don't have to sit around and do nothing, I mean, after all. Okay, that takes us to case 0174, I believe. Yes, 10 Foster Street, UT Urban Transitional District. Joseph Williams is the owner. The owner wishes to reconstruct a single-family residential structure. Variances would be required from Article 2841H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, to allow maintaining a 5-foot 2-inch property line setback with a replacement single-family dwelling, and Article 2877G2, setbacks from lot lines to allow parking within 5 feet of the property line.
That's correct. My name is Joseph Williams. I am the owner of the property. My daughter, we,
Do you both swear to tell the truth?
Swear to tell the truth.
we do. I do.
And I am Jacqueline Williams. I'm his daughter.
What would you like us to know?
Stop signing in. So we'd like you to know that the original house was built in the 1880s. It's part of an older area of Concord, New Hampshire. Unfortunately, my dad lost his property, or sustained substantial damage to the property due to a fire back in February. So we're trying to rebuild on the existing location, which is smaller than most lot lines. In order to build in a timely fashion, he'd like to place a manufactured home on the lot. However, most manufactured homes do come larger than the existing property size, which would mean extending it out by roughly 2.2 feet to the, depending on how you're facing it, from the street side to the left.
Let me clarify there, it's a modular home,
Modular home.
not manufactured trailer. Please, correct?
It's modular.
Yeah.
It's a modular, it's being built in the factory, delivered
Yes.
on site.
Yes,
Thank you.
I recall being reprimanded on that
I
subject myself.
just want to make sure that it's being presented correctly for what
Okay.
I understood it to be. Thank you.
Apologies, I didn't.
Nope.
We'd like to keep the existing driveway that's in place and not move that and move the structure over. Currently, that would match what is existing in the neighborhood, which is, if you look at the photos, I don't know what that's going to look like, but there's
So-
a street view. That was,
For the structure of the house, I have that. on that, yeah. Oh, that's the building. Sorry. Existing house,
yes,
Yeah, that's the existing house, correct.
and then,
that's the
yeah,
home.
it'll turn all of them.
That's the house.
That's the proposed.
That's the,
Proposed.
so that's
The proposed
the
house, yes.
proposed house. So are you reusing the existing foundation?
It would need to be, the basement would need to be dug out to make room for the new modular home. So it has to be
You're gonna dig it out
extended.
and then add to extend the foundation?
Correct.
You wanna
We're
see this?
moving it backwards and to the,
You may have it.
I'm
This is
directionally
an
challenged, I
interior.
apologize, so I'm like, you're sitting here like this. if you're facing the home to the left-hand side. Yeah, unfortunately, when reviewing the options to demolish and rebuild the existing home would take substantial amount of time and funds, and we're limited with what insurance does provide out. And we are trying to get him back into his home as quickly as possible, just because it has been a huge displacement. He's lived there since 2006, and it has been a huge hardship for him to be out of his home, away from his things. He's unfortunately already lost everything that he owns. Everything in the house was considered a loss. So we just want to start anew. So this is the fastest option as well.
Yeah, the option of the modular home is also,
Less disruptive.
I pick it thinking in my neighborhood. If I build a house, a construction takes a long time with trucks, people, materials, coming and going for a long time.
In a really
A
narrow
modular home is set in 3 days. The rest of the work is done inside for about 2-3 more weeks, which spare all my neighbors from the pain of living in a construction site.
It also limits the blocking of that street, which is particularly narrow.
Yeah, it's pretty narrow. So
We also want to maintain the driveway because it is a narrow street and there's very limited parking. It is currently a 3-bedroom, which doesn't really allow for enough parking for the resident, as well as accessing the garage that's on his diagram in the back, so that he can protect his car during the winter. He is 73 years of age, and cleaning off the car during those winter months is going to get more difficult.
yeah, on the diagram that you had, it's not the bulkhead is not drawn, but there is a bulkhead entry to the basement that limits actually the position of my driveway. The bulkhead disappears, so my driveway can come 3 foot towards my house.
A total of 12 feet for the driveway.
Yeah, 12 feet for the driveway.
You're saying the bulkhead was there before? Or it's been there
The
in new
bulkhead is
design?
going to be put on the back of the house.
The bulkhead was there before.
The bulkhead was given about the house, yes.
Okay, but the new building will not have a bulkhead on that side?
No,
Okay.
So if I'm reading your application correctly, you're actually going to be improving the extent of your nonconformance, right? Because you're eliminating, right now, you're in the setback on 2 sides, and you're going to be eliminating it on one.
yes,
Not getting any more into the setback on the side, right?
that's correct. The only setback that I am asking for is on the right-hand side of the house, because I'm going to move the new basement back to conform to the 15-foot, which is fine.
But your current house, or the house you had before the fire, was also in that 5'2" setback, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Prior to the fire, you had the same setback violation, right?
Yes, it was 12 foot, 12 1 inch.
In the front.
In the front, but on the side, it was the same.
5 foot.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
It was
It's
built
the
there
same,
when I
yeah.
bought the house.
And then the parking variance, is that the same as it was prior to the fire, or is that new because of the additional size?
No, the parking variance, it comes because it's the driveway that I had was not conforming to start with.
So it was non-conforming before?
It was not conforming before, yeah.
The driveway didn't burn. Does he really need a variance for that?
Because
No.
because he's here for the
Okay.
new,
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
I'll speak to it after,
Yeah.
it's all right, I'll
Okay.
wrap it up after. but-
Any other questions from the board? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
I really think that the putting this new house there, it will, number one, enhance the looks of the whole neighborhood, and it would probably enhance the value of the properties around me, because the whole neighborhood is gonna be higher in quality. My old house was built in 1880 with technology and architecture from 1880. This house is brand new architecture, brand new building materials. So it conforms with every code, national, state, and how it's called, and city.
Very good. Thank you.
So
you.
nothing else I can add unless you ask.
Thank you. Very good. Please rejoin the crowd, and I'll find out if there's any testimony from the public. Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please come forward.
Modular's come a long way from what it used to be.
Yeah, that's,
And then he's right.
see the appeal,
Well, he's right, it's great for neighbors too.
don't have to rely on a contract.
Swear to tell the truth and nothing but. Would you jot your name on the sign-in sheet and also let us know as you testify for the record?
Too cute.
I want to applaud,
Could we get your name?
pardon?
Your name?
My name is Betty Sealer, and I own the left-hand side adjoining property to Mr. Williams. I want to applaud Mr. Williams for improving his property with this new project. The only thing I would like to see if maybe there could be a place on the lot to designate for snow storage. That's a big problem that we have at that end of Foster Street. Okay, and so that's the only thing. Other than that, I think he's doing a great job.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard in favor of the appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Is there any comment from code enforcement?
If I could just reiterate a couple things. The original foundation is on the screen. It's the darker line. Because he lost his home to a fire, he was allowed to rebuild with all the existing nonconformities. Because of the reasons he stated, he's asking to do the modular home and install the new foundation, which is why he needs all the variances he needs for the driveway
Including the
and for the
driveway.
setbacks.
Okay.
But,
So, because he's making it better, he has to come see us.
yes, basically. Or he didn't want to build an existing foundation because it didn't allow a large enough footprint for the modular homes he has access to.
I understand.
Modular homes have certain conformities of dimensions, the way
Correct.
they're constructed, but I like his comments about, it is definitely faster, less expensive, and it will be a lot less noise and environment for his neighbors. They'll love him more for it, for sure.
Very good. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. Let's see, who's up now? I forget.
Him.
Oh. Now look what I've done.
I already added my comments, I just did.
He made a case in his, Mr. Williams made a case in his notes that it is a very odd set of lots in this neighborhood. And as I'm sure everyone's picked up on, he's making a concerted effort to bring it into conformity, better conformity. So I'm happy with it.
Mr. Waller.
I have nothing to add.
Mr. Monahan.
Yeah, nothing, I do think, if I correct me if I'm wrong, he's moving the bulkhead out of the driveway and over to the back of the house. That may have some benefit to snow storage, make it easy to plow the driveway, shovel the driveway.
For
So
sure.
it would be unusual for us to do anything remarkable on snow storage, but.
That's
do
why
think
I
it
didn't.
is.
That's why I didn't pursue it. I agree. Mr. Winters.
Yeah, historically, when somebody is rebuilding or improving on the same layout, we're inclined to approved the nonconformities that had existed. This is just very slightly different, and obviously for a very good reason. And, you know, given where the driveway is, which it wouldn't be reasonable to force him to move the driveway, there's no other real place to put the house that's gonna conform in any way, so I think it's definitely reasonable.
Very good. I agree with my colleagues. I think that the variances are justified. Is there two of them? Yes, two, one for the driveway and one for the setback. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to grant both variances, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variances are granted. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Sorry to hear about your fire.
Being frighteningly efficient tonight.
Don't jinx it.
What did I say? Okay, Brenda, you're up on this one.
Okay, I'm ready.
The next case is case 0175, 6 North State Street, CBP, Central Business Performance District. Riverbend Community Mental Health, Inc. are the owners. The owners wish to construct a 28-unit multifamily residential structure. Variances would be required from Article 2845E5, locational restrictions to allow residential accessory uses, and Article 2845E3, maximum floor area ratio to allow a floor area ratio of 4.7, where 3.0 is the maximum. I swear you all in. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but.
I do.
When the time comes, if you would identify yourselves as you testify, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Philip Hastings. I'm an attorney with Cleveland Waters and Bass. We represent Catch Neighborhood Housing. You're familiar with Catch. We've been here several times before for different projects, so we're here before you again for another exciting project. I'm here with Tom Furtado from Catch, Morgan Dunson from Nobis Engineering, and Jonathan Holly from Warren Street Architects. I do have a few handouts that did not get into the package. Can I just pass these around? The property we're here for tonight is 6 North State Street. Couple of blocks from here.
It's not 6 North there? Oh, I'm on School Street. Sorry.
Yeah, that didn't look quite
Sorry.
right.
Let me find 6 North State. Maybe that's up here. 0. There it is. Sorry, Phil. That is 6 North State.
Yes, so it's on the easterly side of State Street. It's a relatively small lot, about 6,534 square feet according to the tax records. We have not had a survey completed yet. It has long been a vacant lot. We did do some research into the history of this a little bit. We found some historic maps. There was a building on this property at one time. It shows up in the maps from 1960 with a building on this site that was a pharmacy. I don't know the type of building. I don't know when that building was demolished. But in modern times, the lot has been used for parking. We are not aware, it's currently owned by Riverbend. Riverbend is selling this property. We were here last month for a variance on 3 North State Street. This is part of the same transaction with Riverbend. I don't believe Riverbend has actually used this property for parking for their employees or clients, because there's parking off of Lake Street for that building. Historically, there was some parking leases in place for this property. There are no longer any parking leases that are recorded for the property. It seems to be underutilized as a parking lot. And because of its size, it really doesn't have a lot of economic viability to be a parking lot on its own. It would have to be associated with some other use, it seems to me. I'm going to give a brief description of what we're trying to do, and then I'll turn it over to Tom and Jonathan and Morgan. Again, the neighborhood, it's a downtown neighborhood. There are multiple commercial uses in the area. There are multiple housing uses in the area, including single-family and multifamily apartments. Next door to this property is 4 North State Street, which is an apartment buildings. There are apartments in the properties on Pleasant Street at the corner. There is a very large apartment building a little bit farther down on South State Street. I think it's 5-7 South State Street. Those are all large buildings on relatively smaller lots. As I just mentioned, we were here before you last month to get approval for a rooming house on the old Concord Monitor property across the street at 3 North State Street. It has easy proximity to Main Street, which provides job opportunities, transportation, retail, restaurants, groceries, personal services. So it's an ideal area for residential use. We've submitted a site plan, a preliminary site plan with our application, as well as floor plans. Tom and the engineering and architecture folks can talk a little bit more about that. What we're proposing is an 8-story building with 4 apartment units on each of the top 7 floors. They would be 1-bedroom apartments. The floor level would be used probably for a mix of office space, but also lobby, community room, laundry facility, mechanicals, that type of use. The first floor has about 3,000, as designed, has about 3,600 square feet. The upper floors have about 3,853 square feet per floor. So a total of about 34,000 square feet in terms of the building, but the residential area itself is about 30,574 square feet. The oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The total is 30,574. The residential alone is 26,971. The property is in the Central Business Performance District. The Central Business Performance District provisions are really quite broad. There are many uses which are permitted in this area. It's very flexible in terms of dimensional requirements. There's no parking requirement in this zone. Multifamily use is permitted as of right. There's no minimum yard requirement. There's no maximum lot coverage requirement. There's no minimum lot size requirement. The lot satisfies the frontage requirements. The proposed building will be within the maximum height allowed in this district, which is 80 feet. We will need a conditional use permit from the planning board at site plan as part of the site plan review process for an elevator mechanical at the top of the building, but the building itself is less than 80 feet. And we've done an analysis which shows that it will not obscure the views of the State House dome. The only two variances, Mr. Winters is rolling his eyes. I don't know if in relief or not.
I just didn't know if that's a new thing every applicant has to do.
Yeah, we figure where in the city they are.
I was wondering with the 8 stories.
We
would lead with that.
Yeah, we've anticipated that. We've discussed that with staff, as well as planning staff and Mr. Hall. So we're pretty confident that we do not need a variance or any sort of zoning relief on the height of the building. There are 2 variances we do need, however, and they're both driven because of the residential use. The first is, to the extent we need it, a variance to permit the first floor to be used for non-commercial uses. The ordinance for multifamily dwellings requires, in the CBP, requires that first floors be used for commercial uses as a primary use. Here, again, it's going to be probably a mix of uses that are accessory to the residential use of the building with some office use as well separate, but it wouldn't be a typical first floor retail or office use. The second variance is the more significant one. Your ordinance requires a maximum floor area ratio of residential buildings in this district to be no more than 3, which is the floor area divided by the size of the lots, the total residential floor area divided by the size of the lots. So we need a variance using the 26,971 of square feet of floor area divided by the size of the lot. We would have a floor area ratio of 4.13. So it exceeds the maximum of 3. I'll turn it over to Tom. You can give a little more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you. My name is Tom Furtado. I'm the president and CEO of Catch Neighborhood Housing. Thank you for your time this evening. We're very excited. What we do at Catch, back up a step, what we do at Catch is we develop, maintain affordable and market rate housing, mostly affordable housing. And we currently have approximately 400 residential units throughout Merrimack County, and a significant amount of that is within the confines of Concord. So as I don't need to speak to the need for affordable housing here in New Hampshire, Merrimack County, or in Concord proper, to say that we're excited about the acquisition of this parcel is would understate our excitement. It is while it's a small lot, it is in a perfect location for what we do. Affordable housing, our residents need access to services, public transportation, as Phil mentioned, groceries, etc. This is in walking distance to virtually all of that. It's in walking distance to where many people will work on Main Street, North Main Street, the government agencies, etc. So we're very excited about the location and the ability to develop this particular lot into residential. As Phil mentioned, the biggest variance that we're seeking is the relief on the floor area ratio. It's very interesting that if we were to build an office building, for example, which is not what we do, but if we were to build an office building, we wouldn't need any variance at all. So it's the residential piece of it. The 4.13 times is for the 28 one-bedroom units, and what we found is that's very consistent with many of the buildings in the general area surely exceed the 3.0, and many exceed the 4.0 floor area ratio. So we do not believe that we'll be an outlier by any means with such a variance and with such construction. 28 units is what we're proposing for this particular development. What we use to develop affordable housing is the low-income housing tax credit.
And that low-income housing tax credit, without getting into much very boring detail about it, it's really designed for 30 to 50 residential units. It's difficult to do more than 50, and 30 is really the sweet spot, 30 to 40. We are very confident that we can do this with the 28 units. Anything less than 28, I'm not sure the tax credit program would grant us approval for that. It's quite a process with New Hampshire Housing and HUD. So that's really the need for our 28 residential units. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I don't want to bore you with what we do. Hopefully you're aware of it. If you have any questions for me, please ask. We have our development team here. Morgan is with Novus Engineering. They do our site plans. They'll be doing all the civil engineering. Jonathan is with Warren Street Architects. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Jonathan. He's helping us out doing the design of our building.
Jonathan, do you want to speak or just be available for questions?
Before you go any further,
Sure.
I have a question for Mr. Hall. I'm a little perplexed by the requirement for an FAR here. There's no limit to how close to the lot line you can get.
Correct.
The height of the building, and therefore, in effect, the number of stories, is controlled by
80 feet.
80 feet. So that's how that's dealt with. And there's no specification for what the lot area itself has to be.
Correct.
Where does the
Well-
FAR come into all this?
Well, I'll just say the FAR comes in from, as Mr. Hastings explained, your lot area in the CBP divided by.
No, I understand how
Okay.
it works. What I don't understand is why there is a requirement for an FAR if you've already said.
I need the city planner here who wrote the ordinance to answer that one. Sorry, sir.
Okay. In other words, you don't know either.
Correct.
And it sounds like it's not even required if it's business, if it's office.
I'll trust Mr. Hastings' interpretation of that. I did not look that up when I presented this, but I know the FAR is part of the residential component of this. And it was presented to staff, and I think the biggest concern we had with the FAR, with the lot, when Mr. Furtado, we said, that's a heck of a lot to try to build this on, but that's his concern, not ours.
You're talking about the actual.
Constructability of that lot is a challenge.
Right, yeah.
But that's not a variance issue, that's not an approval issue, that's a good luck, Mr. Furtado.
Buildings are built in the city every day, and fortunately here in Concord, we have some very
But to
competent
that point,
contractors.
whether you think the FAR is required or not, in the memo I gave you, it does talk about what that square footage difference would be, compared
No,
to.
I think it's required. I was just trying to understand the logic behind it.
I don't know it.
Okay. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'll address the variance criteria. I want to hit on some of the key points, starting with public interest in the spirit of the ordinance. We don't believe either of the variances requested is contrary to the public interest or inconsistent with the spirit of the ordinance. The CBP is designed to be flexible and to accommodate an assortment of uses and building types, as you've noted. Housing of this scale will not be contrary to the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the public's health, safety, or welfare. One of the handouts I passed around is sort of a bird's eye view that Jonathan's team presented that I think gives a pretty interesting perspective of what this building would look like in its setting, and it really doesn't stand out as much as you might initially imagine from that view. And as Tom mentioned, there are several neighboring properties that have similar floor area ratios that obviously predated the zoning ordinance. Right next door, the 4 North State Street property, which the owner is here, and I know he's going to speak at some point, has somewhere, it's hard to calculate from the tax records how much is floor area, residential floor area as opposed to not. It appears that 4 North State Street has somewhere between 4 and 5, an FAR between 4 and 5.2. There are several in the area that seem to be over 3. 158, 156 North Main Street, which is Remy's block, with another large building with no excess lot area. That FAR seems to be between 3.8 and 5.2, somewhere in that area. So it's not unusual in the CBP district or in this area to exceed the 3.0.
So real quick, sorry, is it calculated based on just the residential or the entire?
It's I believe, and Mr. Hall can correct me, I believe it's the residential piece, and that's why in my application, I initially included the first floor space, because we thought that was going to be sort of ancillary, mostly residential ancillary, but as we moved a little bit forward, we think that's going to be more office use, maybe not even connected to the residential use. So I think you can look at it both ways, but for an apples to apples comparison, I'm looking at just the residential floors in that calculation.
So that would be in your footnote here, that would bring it down to about 4.1.
4.1, 4.13, correct.
But if you calculate the entire square footage, it's at 4.7.
Yes, if you include and just by way of calculation, each floor is about, well, let me put it this way. In order to get to the 3.0, we would have to remove 3 floors of living area, which is almost 50%. 12 out of the 28 units would go away.
And not likely to get the funding.
And we are not.
The LIHTC program would not approve that.
As to the first floor use, again, depending on how it's used, but I will note that there's multiple properties in the neighborhood that have residential uses on the first floor, including 4 North State Street. That's residential use on the first floor. The ZBA has, with some frequency over the past few years, granted variances in the CBP to permit first floor residential uses.
If I could jump in real quick, just to clarify, we're not intending to put any residential unit on that ground floor. That'll be ancillary, meaning, common space, the elevator, obviously, and we intend to put a satellite office of our property management firm in the front of that location.
So do you definitely need a variance for that, or it's sort of up in the air, so you just put it in just to be safe?
We just put it in to be safe. And architecturally, I think we would probably design that first floor to match a more commercial streetscape, so it doesn't appear.
Because it's not necessarily commercial, like
The
outside.
CBP requires commercial use, i.e. open to the public. They're looking for the retail stores on the first floor in the Central Business Performance District. Second floor could be residential. Just because he's putting an office in there may help get the approval, but it's not really what the ordinance is looking for the first floor in the CBP.
So that's why.
So it could be an office if it was like an office people walk into,
Right.
not a
If
private office.
if you want to move your law office there, then I'd say, yes, that's meeting what the requirement is.
Right.
An internal office to them looks nicer, it's not, whatever they might be putting as ancillary to the residential unit, but that's why he needs a variance for that.
Just to clarify that, we do have customers come into that unit. It wouldn't be I'll use the word private.
But the lounge area that's only for the residents would not count.
Correct.
Right. It'll look compliant from the street, but it technically still needs the approval.
The third prong, the substantial justice prong, there's no gain to the public by denying the variance. There's only harm by not allowing this underutilized vacant lot to be put to an allowed use. There's no nuisance or any sort of safety or health concerns with this building. Again, if this was not a residential building, it would be allowed as a right and we would not be before you. So denying the floor area ratio variance or use on the first floor does not have any public implications in terms of health, safety, and welfare. The fourth prong is whether this variance would result in a diminution of value to surrounding properties. One of the items that I handed out to you is an opinion by Norton Asset Management. I know several of you probably know Bill Norton. He's a well-respected commercial broker and advisor in Concord. He knows the area very well. Norton concluded that the variances requested will have no negative effect on abutting property values. And he based this opinion on a few key observations. One is that housing projects of this type would add, in his words, vitality and energy to the streetscape and would give a sense of progress in the city, a new development of this type. He also noted that the new building will be an aesthetic improvement over a largely empty parking lot, sits vacant, unattended. I wouldn't necessarily call it an eyesore, but it's not exactly a shining example of what the city has to offer architecturally. Mr. Norton noted that a building of this size may impact abutting properties. There's no doubt about that. But that's not the result of the specific variances that are being requested. A commercial building of this size and height is permitted as of right. The variance would increase the residential density over what is allowed. So whatever diminishment in value there might be to abutting properties would occur not because of the variances. It would occur because of perhaps the size of the building. So it would not be fair to conclude that the variance would reduce or diminish the value of abutting properties. And finally, because an infill building of this type is allowed as of right, no abutter has a reasonable expectation that the lot will remain vacant or have a less impactful building on it. This possibility is already factored into the values of those abutting properties, which is how zoning works. You take it with constructive knowledge that something could be built to the full extent of your zoning ordinance. And that's what's happening here. Now to the tough one, hardship. Whether literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. There are special characteristics of this property, notably that this is a small vacant lot which is well suited to a high-density residential use because of its specific location. It's one of very few infill opportunities in the downtown area, and the lot cannot be used reasonably for much else. The parking demand, as I noted earlier, is limited. It's not economically feasible to be a parking lot on its own. It has limited utility for retail development due to its size and also limited demand for that type of use in this location. There is also limited demand for office space here or elsewhere in Concord. We all know the effect that COVID and remote opportunities have had on the office market and the downtown office market. You see developers struggling to fill office space. The economic viability, as Tom mentioned, of a residential project on this site is questionable. And we know that economic circumstances is not necessarily a hardship, but in conjunction with the location of this property, I think it can be a factor in your consideration. As a downtown property, the value of this property is inflated. Over relative to other properties. And construction, as much as Tom says it's going to be easy to construct this
I don't know if I would use the
building,
word easy. but-
it's a challenging location. North State Street is a two-lane street with on-street parking. It's very narrow. There are buildings nearby. This will necessarily drive the ordinary construction cost up, which are already at a high level, and which in turn requires a minimum number of units. Tom talked about the number required for the tax credit situation, but just to make this economically viable, a certain number of units is going to be necessary. It's hard to see how less than 28 units on this site will work financially. And to get to within the floor area ratio of 3 on this site, as I mentioned, would require a loss of 12 units, 3 floors of the building, leaving the possibility of only 6 units, which certainly cannot work on this particular site. So for those reasons, we think we're entitled to a variance. We believe we've met your standards, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Hastings, would you consider it fair to say that the uniques, one of the things we're supposed to be concerned about in the hardship prong is the unique setting of the site, or the site in its unique setting. Would you think it fair to say that its location in this district close by other buildings in a densely built-up location with a certain kind of economic fabric is the unique setting of the site?
Yeah, I think that is fair.
Other questions from the board?
No, but thank you for this, because this puts 8 stories into tremendous perspective. Originally, when you said 8 stories, I thought, wow, that's really tall. And now I'm looking at this little red dot on this map of downtown going, wow, that fits right in to everything else. Thank you.
Mr. Winters?
Devil's advocate, why not, since you're requesting the variance to not have commercial or on the first floor anyway, why not just make it 7 floors with 28 units and just do residential on the first floor? And that's going to reduce your total FAR.
Jonathan, do you have a?
Because in the financing with.
We need to
Jonathan?
swear you in and make sure we know who the heck you are.
I do.
You swear to tell the truth, and you would be?
Jonathan Holly with Warren Street Architects.
Thank you.
So in the financing with New Hampshire Housing Finance, they require, for the number of units, we have to have a community room. It's based on the count. There are ancillary spaces that are required under NEFA's program for that housing. It has to go somewhere. So
What's their ration? Why do they care about a community room to provide financing?
oh, great question, and I'd like to take you to the next meeting with NEFA. It is what it is.
Okay, it's just for whatever
it's
reason,
a written
some
rule,
obscure
so
reason, okay.
they have to have an office on site, they have to have a community room on site. The
Oh.
community room is sized based on the number of units.
So this, so
Well, if I could
that's-
interrupt.
yeah,
So, yes, exactly what Jonathan said. And one of the things that we try to do at Catch is when we do a development, a residential development, we try to create a sense of community. We don't want a bunch of individual homes, if you will, and not that sense of community. So we do playgrounds, and the community room, we find it on other developments, they're very active. Birthday parties, just gatherings on the weekends, and the residents form a sense of community in the room. And as Jonathan stated, the size of it is, there's minimums by New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority dictated by HUD, who provides the low-income housing tax credit program, as to the size of that. We always try to maximize the size of that so that we can have more and more functions within those community rooms. So that floor will have the community room, it will have our property management office as well, and it'll have laundry facilities. And again, Jonathan and I have had this conversation, the size of the elevator takes up a lot of square footage on that footprint.
Okay. And then my last question is the parking. There's no parking required, I understand, but obviously the floor area does requirement does go to the density, which I think might, so where are you expecting the tenants to park?
The city has a parking lot that's available, city revenue, 401 feet away from this site. And what you'll find, and that's not required for any buildings on this site, in this zone, and what we find is that our residents have a much less demand for parking than you would, say, a market rate development. We may have a family of 4 with 1 vehicle. We have single individuals or 2 people with no vehicles. They do a lot of walking, and they rely on public transportation. I said at the beginning, we're excited about this location because of all of that. When we have people out in, say, Pennacook, it's the public transportation is out there, but it's a little more difficult than it will be for our residents at this particular location.
Other questions from the board?
Yeah, just a few. So they're all 1 bedroom?
Yes.
And what is the square footage of them? Are they all the
They are all the same. 4 exactly mirrored units, you'll see them.
Yeah, I saw 1 floor. All 7 floors are the same layout. And how many square feet are the units?
The floor is roughly 3,800 square feet. Divide that, I don't know the number, the apartment number.
950.
950.
Well,
I-
but a lot of the square footage is taken up, I think.
Yeah, there's 2 stairs.
400 square foot is
I
the
think-
stairwells and the elevator.
I think they're 700, 750-ish.
New Hampshire Housing Finance has a minimum requirement for a 1-bedroom, which I think is 630 square feet.
Mhm.
We exceed that.
Actually, it says here 762 on your plan for a typical unit.
Yeah, it was closer than I thought.
Oh, and the south-facing ones, it says 690.
And part of this is curiosity, part of it, you didn't want to talk about it, but I wanted to better understand the tax credit. So what's the total construction cost of the project?
We haven't finalized those numbers just yet.
Okay. And how does the tax credit work? Do you sell the tax credit?
Yeah, so there's a competitive round where you do an application, and each application scores points for different things. I'll give you an example. If you have your approvals in place, you get 10 points. If you're on public transportation, you get 5 points, and it goes on and on. So they allocate, New Hampshire Housing allocates the HUD-provided low-income housing tax credits to the winning applicants. So in this situation, let's say we applied for, and I'm just throwing numbers out here for conversation, $6 million of low-income housing tax credits. If we were granted that, then we would have to, I always use the example of, they'll send me a nice fancy letter that says, congratulations, here's $6 million of tax credits. I cannot go buy 2x4s with that. So we have to syndicate the tax credits and sell them on in the syndicated market for 85, 90 cents on the dollar. And that 85 or 90 cents on the dollar of those tax credits becomes our cash equity for the project. Without the low-income housing tax credits that are syndicated and sold and turned into equity money, there is no way that you could build affordable housing. So the rest of it would be filled with some grant money and some conventional financing. There'll be, at the end of this, there'll be a permanent mortgage that the cash flow from the project can support.
And so have you gone through that process with New Hampshire Housing to score it and know that you have the tax credits?
No, we have to attempt to get our approvals first, and then that round is once a year in August.
So you might go through all this, and then if that further doesn't work, it's just the nature of how do you try it?
Unfortunately, it's the business that we're in, exactly. They only have, the amount of credits allocated to the state of New Hampshire is based on the population. So unfortunately, with 1.4 million people, it's a relatively small number of tax credits allocated to us as compared to Massachusetts or California.
So when will you know?
December.
Yeah, November, December. So there could be 10 to 15 applications, never, and maybe 6 might get funded. And that's what happens every year, and it's done on an annual basis.
So you need to
So
go,
it's a competitive round.
Yeah.
so
The
once
more
you find out what we
prepared-
do, you want to, sorry.
The more shovel-ready you are, the better you score. And that's why
Being able to say we have our variances from the city, yeah, okay.
We have our approvals in place.
building
exactly.
permits in hand.
And those soft costs that you're incurring now, that's all business risks for Catch?
That's on us. If we don't get approval, or we don't get allocated tax credits, that's called the cost of doing business.
I've sat in on a few housing forums recently, because that's what I do for business. And I think they talked about we're currently like 20,000 units short of what we need for housing. And,
Yeah.
and selling housing at a rate, a cost that's above like 80% of the state on
Yeah.
average.
There's
Just
numbers
so
there.
you're aware how this isn't just a need for affordable housing, this is a desperation at this point.
And just as a point, I'm not sure it's relevant here, but the rent that we, the residents that qualify for our affordable housing apartments under the low-income housing tax credit is all based on their percentage their income as a percentage of the area median income. And in Merrimack County, that's $115,000.
Okay.
The area
None of
median.
that actually bears on our neighborhood
Right.
here, so, but thank you very much for that information.
Interesting to know.
Are there any other questions? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please, did I see a hand? No. Is there anyone here who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Please come forward.
Doesn't matter, Chief?
It does not matter. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but?
I do so.
May we have your name, please?
My name is Norman Lee. I am
Link?
Lee,
Oh,
L-E-E.
Lee.
I've been before this board previously for some of the development we've done in the downtown. I respect Mr. Hastings tremendously as he was our former counsel, and I've spoken with Mr. Furtado at length. I respect these gentlemen entirely, and I do what they do. So I'm not here necessarily opposed to the project, but I'm here to talk about the real-life impact of what a project doing 3 floors above does. I own the property with this KJD Realty, which is number 4 North State Street. It is on the southern border, and it's directly impacted by the project that they're proposing.
Can you show us where that is?
That yellow building.
Okay.
The one that looks like a fantasy tower there, yes.
Got you.
It's an apartment building, right?
What's that?
It's apartments.
All apartments. And just to their point, that property doesn't lend itself to commercial on the first floor because of the issue with the stairs leading into it. So really what it comes down to is this is the real life impact. And I'm not opposed to the project, but we're looking at a square footage of approximately, I could be wrong off. It looks like I did some quick numbers as I was sitting in the office, in the audience. And it looks like there's 5,600 square feet available for the project. And if I heard correctly, I believe it was 3,600 square feet as a footprint that you're proposing on that site, gentlemen, more or less. Here's where the impact hits me. And I disagree in part with what their consultant Norton was talking about, because there is real life impact by putting this building in. Case in point, that building right there owns there's 16 units in that building. 2 of the rear units, the lower rear units, are almost completely devoid of natural light because of their loci to the buildings around them. Those buildings operate at almost a 20% discount to the other units in that building because of the lack of light. So when I was just sitting there doing quick calculations, I looked at the chairs that we were sitting in, and the chairs look like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 chairs would make almost 10 feet in terms of what they're proposing to where the new building would be and where my building is be. Now, 7 stories above, we sit on, if you're looking at it, more or less the sun would come up in the east and set in the west. That almost literally cuts off the natural light. So the impact is the discount that those units will experience once this building is put in place. I'll have almost no natural light. And one of the biggest things, as these gentlemen know, and I live in the real world, so this is not conjecture, this is not theory, this is real life. When you start cutting out natural light to an apartment, I immediately lose half my audience as to what would be interested in that apartment. In what I do, values of property is based on what the rent brings in minus the expenses divided by the cap rate. For every dollar that I lose in rent, there is anywhere from $6 to $8 per in value that I lose on that property. Not to mention the cash flow to support the expenses of that building. So the impact is real world. And I guess this is not so much as an opposition to the project, but the issue and the hardship is on that southern setback and how it impacts me. 10 feet doesn't let anything in. Now, if someone's going to ask me what does let natural light in, I don't know. But I would have to really, for me to be comfortable, and I'm not sure how much sway I have, but this directly impacts the ability for me to survive, because that's a major part of my real estate portfolio, is that one building and the rent that it brings in. We're in a position right now, and Tom and anyone that's alive and eating and goes shopping can tell you what's going on. We have a slowing of rent that we're seeing as it's working its way up from Florida right now, because again, I manage almost 400 units myself of property that I own. This is a real impact, and it's got me concerned. They're 100% correct in what they're saying. In fact, I knew that there has to be some development, but really, this is real-life impact that negatively impacts where I'm going to be 2 years from now. And again, I'm not opposed to the project, but I guess I'm looking for some reasonable accommodation in terms of what this project would look like. If any one of you were in my seat right now, and you knew what I knew, and where rates are going, where insurances per unit is almost tripled on a residential unit for commercial real estate. The game is changing, and the rents aren't rising in the same lockstep with expenses. With this project, with this coming in, this is going to negatively impact my ability to service my taxes, my expenses, and on top of that, try and get any cash flow out of it, which is why I'm a real estate investor. I do the same thing. I operate almost within the same demographic that he's going for, and I can tell you this is going to considerably set me back.
What would you suggest?
I'm not pushing against their project. They have to do it, and that's a reasonable concession. My suggestion is we have 5,600 square feet in which to work. They're suggesting a 3,600 square foot.
6,500.
I'm sorry?
6,500.
That's even more to my point. If we could somehow configure the building in such a way to give me a little more airspace between the buildings. I literally took a measurement. You're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with this gentleman. That's the space. They're literally going to be able to reach out and shake hands with their neighbor across the way.
So it's not so much the height, you're talking about the setback.
I'm not trying to negate, because I understand I work in the same world I'm not nonprofit, but for this to pencil out, he needs his units. I'm not opposed to that. I know what it's going to do here, but the more I can give a spread between the buildings.
Can I just ask a few questions?
Yes, ma'am.
How many units on that side of the building will face that building? 8 units. And what's your market rate on that side right now?
I apologize, I didn't come, but I think those market rates are anywhere from $1,600 to $1,800.
Okay. And when did you buy it? The building?
July 2019.
In 2019?
Yep.
Before the market spiked. I'm just
The
trying.
market, the market along, so we can't live in just a bubble of the market spiking, because along with that spike, the interest rates started kicking up, and our cost of our
Have you
materials.
refinanced it since you bought it? Did you refinance it?
Brenda, I think we're getting into territory.
I'm sorry, I'm
it's-
respecting his argument. At the same time, I'm trying to work out the argument, because the argument is that this is going to impact him financially. But realistically, what I'm looking at for numbers, because this is what I do, I don't see that impact. I'm trying to respect his argument while breaking it down.
So let me.
But you're right, I'm getting in the weeds.
The argument in short is diminution of value.
It will.
You could have inherited it. I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean.
But I didn't.
Exactly. I'm not saying you did, but I'm just saying it doesn't really, right, it doesn't matter how you acquired it. If it diminishes the value in half, that's your argument, right?
If I could return to my question that I asked you before.
Yes, sir.
10 feet, in your opinion, is not enough. How much is enough?
I would like the opportunity to talk with Mr. Furtado and Mr. Hastings to see what's reasonable. Again, I'm not pushing back on the building itself. but I'd like to work something out that I can get natural light into those buildings for my clients, my tenants. I'm telling you, it's gonna be like New York, and they're just gonna be looking at one another 10 feet away. That's not a big jump, hop, skip, going from one building to the other, and you'll have 15 minutes, if that, of light that comes down before they lose light for the rest of the day.
For some reason, they pay $6 grand in New York,
In New York,
even without the light.
for 500.
Right, but we're not in New York.
Right, right.
And to answer that question more fully,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. The value of property went up tremendously, but that was due to diminishing of the value of the dollar. So lock and
Well,
step.
I think, again, we're into territory that doesn't bear on
I just
what we're
wanted to
trying
answer a
do.
question. I'm sorry,
So,
man.
Chris, how much space between your building and the building to the south of you exists?
It's immediate, there's I think 12 to 15 feet on the right-hand side, because we have fire,
Sorry,
right, if you go a little further,
Yeah.
right there.
trying to get it in there.
So I'm just trying to get
There it
a
is.
sense
Oops.
of, yeah, you're almost there. So
There you go.
the building as proposed, is it going to be about, is the alleyway, I guess, going to be about the same?
I don't know, he's saying more. It's probably about,
We can address this.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Lee, is there anything else you'd like us to know?
no, I'm very much for the project. I think it's a great use of the space. We've watched it do nothing and languish for years, but I just wanted my opportunity to be heard and how this is going to negatively impact this building.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Swear to
Good
tell the whole
evening,
truth.
members. Ron Rayner. I do by here swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, and opinion. Many decades ago, when I was a state employee, I was also a public hearing examiner, and we found it helpful then, and perhaps you may going forward. I wish both you and the planning board had a format where the applicant would do a presentation. Then you would ask for those in favor and those opposed. I would wish there'd be a third option of questions, and then allow the public to decide, because I always have questions.
What are your questions?
Okay, so I would have liked to have heard things about the architectural rendering of the building, the facade. I think as to how it fits into this historic district is very important. Since the applicant was correct in indicating that the Business Performance District downtown does not require any minimum number of parking spaces per unit of residential unit space. And as you try to, Chris, to figure out and understand the logic behind FAR, it's incomprehensible to me how the city does not have a data point for at least having one parking space per unit of building or residential building. It's beyond me, but this is not the applicant's argument tonight. I think that this could be a burden on the city citizen taxpayers. I think it could be contrary to public interest, because I'm going to focus again on parking. Yes, some may not have vehicles, but with 28 units, I would expect a minimum anyway, as a guess, 20 cars. Parking downtown is a fiasco, and it's just going to come back to bite us in the butt further down the road when the city is forced to build another municipal parking garage. This is just going to parlay into that. So I wish they had addressed, they did mention parking. They were correct in stating no minimum spaces required. Have they thought about putting one level of parking underneath as a possibility? I agree that the lot alone by itself is not suitable for parking, but it's just the absence of parking accommodations that will affect all of us in the city, both in terms of convenience as well as a taxpayer. And because it's a nonprofit, I'd love to hear them say that, yes, the affordable housing market, no doubt we need it. I totally agree. We need additional units. I support that concept. But I'd love to know as to what they contribute to our tax base. So with that, I'm going to basically say if this can't be addressed this evening, that you defer your decision or disapprove of this until it is better addressed. And if they can't come back with anything for parking, that they do a fee in lieu of, which has been done within the city, a fee in lieu of, to go to the general parking fund.
Thank you very much.
Questions? No.
Do you live downtown or just?
I do. I can walk. Great. I do. Are you waiting for me?
I was just going to add too, while you're signing, we can only address the variances that are in front of us.
Yeah,
So
I kind of figured.
unfortunately, some of the things you brought up aren't anything we can actually address because they have nothing to do with the zoning variances that are in front of us.
I figured as a former.
I just don't want you to think we're ignoring you. It's,
No, as a former hearing examiner, I understand.
thank
Don't
you.
like it, but I understand.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Any comments from code enforcement?
No, sir.
Mr. Hastings, would you like to offer any factual clarification?
Yes, I would. Just briefly, I think some of it Ms. Perkins just touched on. You know, obviously the parking, there's no minimum parking requirement in this district. The architectural design, we think we've got a pretty good design. I think Jonathan and his team have been thoughtful about what we're proposing. That's certainly will go through several iterations before there's a final design. It will go before architectural design review for the city and the site plan process, so it's not within the ZBA's jurisdiction. The setback issue, just to clarify, again, I'm a lawyer and Jonathan can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm reading the site plan correctly, we're proposing a building setback of about 11 feet. Again, where there's no minimum setback at all, about 11 feet for almost the entire length of that southerly side of the building, and then to accommodate a little extra space, it jumps down to 5 feet. And that's in comparison to Mr. Lee's property, which is virtually on the property line already. So just by way of comparison, we're trying to respect that space, even though there are no minimum setback requirements. And theoretically, we could build up to the property line without a variance. We're not doing that. And again, the variance in this case is not for setbacks or height. It's for the floor area ratio, which in this case only indirectly, if at all, would drive the height of the building. And again, and Tom can add to this, there's a misconception about Catch Housing that it doesn't pay taxes to the city. Catch does pay real estate taxes on all of its residential project. It's not tax exempt.
Thank you. I was going to bring that up. I know as a nonprofit, that's different, but the property
All of our
itself, you're
all of
not
our
exempt.
residential developments pay real estate taxes just like everyone else.
And I believe you're required to pay the impact fee, correct?
Oh, yes, you just sent us a big bill for that, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill, can I ask you a question on the? So I've kind of struggled to think about how strictly to look at the diminution standard in a case like this, because I guess theoretically any new units, I mean, it is a fair number of units, even though it's more or less allowed, is gonna impact the rent on the other unit buildings in the area. But obviously, like you said earlier, that it's sort of understood that someone could build something there at some point and could be factored in. But if his rents go down, putting aside the light, just because there's, more units is gonna tend to depress the rents in the area, at least a little bit. Does that count as diminution?
Right, I think, I commiserate with Mr. Lee's situation. I mean, there is the potential for his rents to go down. Mr. Norton was not, we specifically asked him to consider that question in his opinion, and Mr. Norton was pretty clear that that there's no support for that in the marketplace. Again, it's a question of real world experience versus theoretical to some extent. But I would suggest, I tried to suggest earlier, that the fact that we have a zoning ordinance that sets expectations for property owners, and yes, there may be a impact, a consequence by an abutter building to the limits of what's allowed by the ordinance, but that's factored into any valuation of your property. It's a question of reasonable expectations about what could be done. Just as Mr. Lee could tear his building down and build a similar 6 or 7 story building. It's tough when you've got competing property owners.
If I could comment on that, if I was understanding it as our 28 units may create competition for Mr. Lee's. There's a need for 20, 30, 40,000 units in there, so I'm not sure that it's going to be a real competition. And we have a very specific target market, which I think is a little, I can't speak for Mr. Lee's building, but I do not believe that that's a regulated affordable housing thing. And something that obviously everyone understands, but I just want to point out, we're proposing an apartment building that will be facing Mr. Lee's building. So it won't be only his north side apartments that look at the other building, ours will as well. Thank you.
And if it was an office building you were building, you could build up right up to the property line, not have that 11-foot buffer, and
Yeah, there's no restriction regardless
not be
of
here either.
use.
okay, yeah.
There's no minimum setback in this district.
So you
We're
could have been up to
designing
the
this
property
building
line
because we
anyway.
recognize that there needs to be some light
space.
and airflow between the two buildings, and physical separation between the two buildings. We're not building in 1880 where walls abut each other. So we have recognized the need for that.
I just want to point one thing out. So in the building code, if you were to build a commercial building right up to the property line, there are fire rating requirements. So whether there are fire shutters or a solid wall, we have to maintain when you get that close to the property line. So you could imagine a commercial building gets built and it's a solid wall against the neighboring building.
Right, yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? So
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to do here is to balance that out. We have purposely stepped the windows to the units back. We've tried to balance the building on the site. We talked about early moving the building to the north, but you're creating the same issue by pushing the building against the north property line that Mr. Lee's property has, because then the building's on the property line to the north. So if the dentist on the north side decided to tear his building down and build something, we're now in the same position that we were there. And to the point of Mr. Lee's property, all those windows are on the north side of the building, so they get no direct sunlight. I'd be happy to sit with Mr. Lee as the design progresses, to figure out how we could perhaps do a reflective surface or some kind of design element that assists him. But that's a double-edged sword too, because now you create something that's reflective, you know, do you want to look at that?
They
So,
don't
I mean,
normally get,
it's,
yeah.
You know, it's a back and forth.
Gotcha.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have two requests before us. One is for a variance for the floor area ratio to allow residential construction in this particular location, or at least of as many units as they're asking for. And the other is for a first floor use that is ancillary to the residential rather than a commercial use peculiar to itself. I'm going to start this one over at the end with Mr. Wallner. How do you see it, sir? Do you want to take them one by one? I mean, in other words, the two issues separately?
For discussion, we can probably do them together, right?
Sure.
Maybe vote on them separate.
Well, in terms of the maximum, I guess we heard testimony that it's not uncommon to find other units in the city that exceed the maximum ratio. So that gives me some feeling of support for that particular variance request.
How about the question of non-commercial use, or not strictly speaking commercial use on the first floor?
And again, I think we've already seen other occasions in Concord where that has been allowed.
Okay. Jim?
I agree with Mr. Hastings that the hardship is going to be the hardest one to figure out. It strikes me that the hardship seems to be more economic in that if they needed to build a residential apartment building that complied with the ratios, it would not produce enough units that they could build it economically. So, then there were a series of other, it's not much other use for the empty parking lot and things like that. So anyway, I'm struggling to get to yes on hardship, but I'm willing to listen to my colleagues on that.
All right. Andrew?
I think we actually, a couple of months ago, we were educated on some case law about the economics of the project and the economic viability of the project can constitute a hardship.
We were. It was the city solicitor discussing the Siborowski project.
Yes, thank you. And I don't have the exact quotes from the cases, but my recollection is that it can. To which extent, or do we have to, or how much we should, I think is, we have a lot of discretion over. But here I think, and that's basically what all of their arguments come down to, because even the first, they need financing, they need the low tax credits to make the project viable, and with construction costs, it probably, balanced off by what their, what rent they need to get. That makes sense. So given that it's not an absurdly high ratio, and I do find it credible that they could not do the project otherwise, and there's no other really realistic use for it, and it's not a good use of this to just sit as an empty parking lot. I know parking's an issue downtown, but I think even more importantly, housing's an issue everywhere. So, so I'm inclined to approve them. I just want to briefly address the diminution of rent argument that Mr. Lee presented, which I do get a little caught up on, because I guess theoretically, it's like we had that car wash case where another car wash owner who's across the city came in and said, well, it's going to hurt my car wash because I'll have less people paying. And I guess arguably that was a diminution. But I think to think of it that theoretically, on the other hand, it could improve Mr. Lee's property, because if you're you know, paradoxically, if you have a whole lot of uses, even if they're similar, all near each other, they tend to beautify the neighborhood and, you know, as opposed to just having one kind of apartment building kind of standing out. So it's kind of speculative how it'll affect the property values, but I don't think it's the type of diminution, if any, that would disqualify them for a variance.
To both the things you just said, I'll piggyback on those. In that financial piece, not even their project financially, really more realistically, the potential other uses of the lot would not be viable financially, profitable financially to try to put something there, right? So an office building with retail in the bottom, like to try to construct that would not be fine. So not even using that financial piece for their project, the hardship is that lot is really almost impossible to make profitable with as much office space and retail space that we already have open and available in the city. Why would somebody start construction on a lot that's not right on the, you know, right in a really good spot? So I think not having to use their financial piece, it's just the viability of that piece. To me, that speaks to the hardship of the lot. While I can respect a hardworking person who's bought property and wants to make a profit from it, those same units at $1,600 to $1,800 just 5 years ago were renting probably for $1,100 to $1,400 a unit. So I don't see a diminishing value. The other units on the other side are already in that same situation, and we are at like a 0.01% rental availability. I have people that have been looking for a rental for over a year, in fact, using attorneys to be able to stay in their current rentals just because they can't find something. So we're going to be a long time before we have an issue with rental, loss of rent. I mean, I'm respecting that, you know, that's his concern, but I don't see that as a reason to deny the two variances that are in front of us.
Question for Andrew. I could be wrong, and so I don't want to rush decision on this, but I think the case law you talked about with regard to the ability to argue the economics of creating a hardship wasn't the test that it couldn't just be based upon the claims of the applicant. They needed to have some evidence or supporting record in order to use that as the hardship claim. And again,
I think that's kind of why I was speaking on the other ideas of use of lot, and not to the project itself.
I could speak to that, I think.
Okay.
As I understand it, the courts have found that the board can rely on its own knowledge and understanding of these things. We can ask for technical backup from experts, but if we are comfortable that and I'm not saying we are in this case, but if we're comfortable that we think we understand the question, we can go ahead and make a decision without necessarily getting a pro forma. Now, that's not 100% consistent with what the city attorney said. You're quite right about what she said. But I seems to me read that in more than one case, that the board is entitled to rely on what it knows about the local neighborhood, which would include property values.
Well, I think-
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think with understanding the tax credits, the way they work, if they don't get them, the project's not happening anyway.
Yeah, but I don't want a contingent. I mean, we don't want to. You're not suggesting that we make that a condition of the approval.
No, that's theirs to deal with.
I don't think the means of financing is something we can.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay.
And kind of just
not what it's suggesting.
Echoing what Chris said, because my recollection is the cases said we can consider economic viability. I think the suggestion to us from council, it was that, you know, we shouldn't just take the applicant alone without kind of critically analyzing what they're saying.
I think that was more in a situation of someone claiming a diminish of value without proving a diminish of value, more than making a clear statement of we have to have so many things in order to receive like these credits that will make something happen. I think
it was more, I try to interrupt, but I think it was more in line with when an applicant says, without this variance,
I don't have a project.
I don't have a project,
Yeah.
right? So if I can't block the State House view, I can't build. You probably shouldn't use that.
Right.
That's not a good example, Jim.
But in this case, I think, I mean, he's not like a layperson homeowner who just said, I don't have the money for this, otherwise this is obviously his profession, and he was pretty credible about the details, as well as Mr. Holly, who's also an expert on the financing issues. So I think that kind of, to me, it's credible.
The way I look at it, I'm in agreement, I think, with most of the things that I've heard people say. On the subject of the diminution of value, if somebody can do something within the confines of the ordinance and it diminishes the value of the property next door, that's not something we have any control over.
Agree.
And in this case, they could build a building there that might diminish even more the value of the neighboring property. And what we're looking at is something that does it less than what they could do under other circumstances. Now, I understand that we have to look at what we're being shown, but I don't think it's irrelevant that the ordinance would allow them, just as with the parking, it allows them to build what they want to build, or at least what they're showing us.
Well, without the without the variance for the ratios, they can't build what they want to build.
They can't build it as high as they want to build it, but if they were building an office building, they could.
It's
Yes,
only
but
the
they're not
use.
asking us to build, they're not asking to build an office building, they're asking to build something 7 stories high.
Correct.
Whereas if they complied with the ordinance and didn't, and build it to the allowable ratios, it would not be as high, right?
That is correct. That's why I made the reference to the office building as.
But they are within the 80 feet that they need to be.
Right, they presented that they're building
Yeah.
below 80 feet except for the mechanicals, which is a CUP.
Right.
To answer, they also represented that they could build an office building up to 80 feet. I did not confirm that, but I'm going to trust Mr. Hastings that he understands our ordinance, and that would not require any FAR ratio if it was all office.
Which is weird, but that's what it is.
Yeah, it's an anomaly created by the ordinance, in which I'm wrestling with, which is why you're asking me a very good question I don't have a very good answer for. But the way I see it, the ordinance is, as it applies to this zone, is not intended to prohibit building out to the property line and up to 80 feet.
Yeah.
It's just because they want to use it as an apartment house that they confront this. There's nothing about an apartment house that's any more injurious to the interests of the neighbors than would be an office building. So that's where I run into.
Well, you did ask the question of why is the ratio what it is for apartment building as opposed to a.
Right, and the answer
office
is.
building we didn't get.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Well,
Yeah.
somebody knows. Nobody in the room tonight knows.
No.
It's just some quirk of the
I
code.
I personally think it's an anomaly in the ordinance.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion, and I think you can make an argument that when you do find a true anomaly in the ordinance, that is a place where, absent changing the ordinance, you could consider granting variance.
So it didn't have to do with the ordinance writers saying we want shorter residential facilities.
Right.
Well, it may be, right?
It could be they want to have office uses in the downtown area, they want to maximize office use, perhaps.
Maybe, I don't, but there's no prohibition on apartment houses downtown.
No.
But even Mr. Hastings seems a little uncertain about it, because he calculated based on the total, but then said in his footnote, it might be lower if we use
It would be, yeah.
residential only.
If you excluded the first floor, because that's not residential. I'm not
He
sure I
didn't
agree with that
exclude the word.
interpretation.
But it still would exceed the.
Right.
He included the first floor in his initial
Original.
calculation, and then the footnote said, well, maybe it's lower if we exclude the first floor, like kind of suggesting he wasn't sure if we should exclude the first floor or not.
But it still went from 4.7 to 4.1.
Because like Chris said, it could be an anomaly that it's not really clear either way, and that's why it could only be a 4.1, not a 4.7.
That's why it's giving me a headache.
Without understanding it fully, I think the FAR would come into more play with some of the larger acreage developments that we apply that to. But
Right.
that's all I can say to it right now in regards to what that would create when you look at a 14-acre lot width.
Yeah, but that's, yes, and that's not a place where you'd have a zero lot line situation.
Right.
I think we're up at, I don't think a literal interpretation of the ordinance is justified here, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's an easy question to parse out intellectually, but that's how I come down on it, for the reasons that I gave.
The other issue on diminution is that, the neighbor said that it actually wasn't the height as much as the spacing out.
And yet,
If it was 3 stories lower,
It would still block his light, right?
It would block some of it.
it would still block.
it would block,
It would block less, I guess, but he seemed more worried about how far out it went, and that is not part of the variance.
no.
I, Go ahead.
He's had the benefit of having an empty lot next door instead of what he has on the other side. That's a benefit he's been able to take advantage of in these previous years, not necessarily a diminish of, it's just a benefit he was been able to enjoy.
Yeah. Now-
It doesn't take away from what this property has the ability to become. I still see a hardship on the lot itself.
I do
not
too.
Being, yeah.
And that was what I was about to get to, is
Okay.
point number 2. If you take the FAR on its own, never mind the question of
Yeah.
diminution of property values, it creates a situation, I think they've made a convincing argument, where essentially it's one of the criteria for a variance, or for a hardship. You can't do what the ordinance would
Yeah.
allow. You can't do anything, really, if you can't exceed the FAR with an apartment house in that location. Again, you could probably make a plausible argument on the other side, but that's how I come down on it, speaking strictly for myself. And I do think that we heard testimony that the location and the configuration, economic and physical, of what goes on around it, which is why I asked Mr. Hastings that question, creates a peculiar characteristic of that lot that is one of the reasons why you couldn't build that building higher than at all if you didn't get forgiveness on the FAR. And clearly, the ordinance does intend to encourage construction of residential uses downtown. So we're having to reach a little bit. It's not an easy one in my mind, but all of that is a long-winded way of saying that if someone wants to move
I
proof,
was just going to say,
I'd vote for
with
it.
all of that said, I'm inclined to approve the 2 variances that are requested in front of us on 6 North State Street.
And I'm sure that Mr. Hall and Ms. Toot will make perfect sense
Of all of that.
all of this.
We'll send it to you, sir.
Okay.
All this stuff.
So I'll make the motion, you can make it sound good. Does that fair?
I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion to approve, you can make it sound good.
The findings of fact to be sent to all of you, and we'll make sure
Okay.
we
Yeah,
capture it.
we always have a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
And I know I've been challenging on this,
No,
but I
that's
just want to
good.
make sure.
It's
Well, I
been
think
good,
you've been
it's been a
asking some
good
very good
discussion,
questions.
I think
yeah.
that, Chris, I think you got me with the literal interpretation doesn't seem to be, to make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
So do I have a motion
yes.
to grant both? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any more discussion on the motion?
And it was for both?
Both.
And I'm sure you've got enough ammunition.
She typed it up. Like I said, you'll all see it, but I'll be able to get the findings of fact.
Why is she making faces at me?
Well, she's going to talk to you after about
Yeah,
this
yeah.
swapping.
Okay, we have a
Just,
motion and a
just
second.
before we go, I want to make sure that we reinforce it in the record that with regard to the diminution of value, we did have written testimony submitted from
Yes, that it would not
an
diminish the
expert in the
value.
field, right?
Yeah.
And we considered the argument of the neighbor that he felt it would, and for better or for worse, we came to conclusions on that. We did not ignore the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variances are granted.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now, back to you, Mark, for the last
Your
one.
turn. Sound down.
Howard Market voted.
And this one is different. This is an equitable waiver,
Oh, yeah, right.
which has different criteria than either a variance or a special exception. And in this case, what we have is 64 Regional Drive, an IN Industrial District, Consolidated Communications of Northern New England, LLC, are the owners. And they're asking for an equitable waiver for a storage shed that was constructed around 1990, and if I read the application correctly, is in violation of the setback. Is it a side yard setback?
Side yard.
Side
No,
yard setback.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Dan Moran with Moran Contracting.
Do you swear to tell the truth, Mr. Moran?
I do.
Thank you so much. What would you like us to know?
Okay, here tonight on behalf of Consolidated Communications. We are the general contractor and construction manager for them in New Hampshire and Vermont. They are currently looking to expand the parking area, well, more for storage, 64 Regional Drive, and we are going through the engineering, process, for that project. And the application was ready to go in, and I think on initial review, it was found out by the city that there was a auxiliary structure, basically a storage shed, that was constructed about 35 years ago, and it seems to be encroaching on the setbacks on the property. Basically, it's, the green long rectangle, that's the storage shed, correct. And if you can see, the blue line is the property, and the purple or pink line is the setback line. So it appears that the structure was built a little out of skew, following the proper setback lines, and this was constructed about 35 years ago. From our knowledge, the proper
Permitting was done.
permitting was done, for the structure, and we believe that this was just an error on, maybe the surveying or whoever was laying out that day. So they're, seeking a waiver for this, to see if, because of the time that has passed, it doesn't seem to be obstructing any of the neighbors. We did look at the structure itself. Not sure who the abutting neighbor is, but if you go behind that shed, the land actually, there's a very steep grade where it drops off, so I don't believe that anyone would really ever be building, in that area. It's kind of in a wooded area, so we're just kind of seeking, approval for this to be, amended, and see what can happen with it.
Any questions? Mr. Moore?
How much would you have to move it for it to be conforming?
It's a concrete building, it's not gonna move. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, so when you said
It's a
shed, it's
slab,
not, yeah.
it's a slab foundation, CMU construction, with a, a pitched roof.
So it'd have to be torn down and rebuilt.
It would.
How much out of conformance is it, I guess?
I think we're about, the corner, the back corner is touching with the lower one, and I think
sorry.
on the far, that would be the north side, I believe it's about 4 to 5 feet over the line.
Looks like more than that to scale.
It's about a 10, I believe the structure's about 10 feet.
Oh, is it only 10 feet wide?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, then I take that back. Looks like 4 to 5 feet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
The record will show that there was no one here to testify in favor or in opposition. Is there any comment from code enforcement?
No, this is one of those interesting things that happens in the city. I said no, and here I am talking. They came for a site plan for a parking lot. When they presented the true surveyed lot, they said, oops, look at this. So it's just an extra waiver. It really makes sense in this situation.
Very good. Thank you.
Move approval. Second.
Any discussion on the motion? We should
You so
acknowledge.
patiently waited.
We should, yeah, Mark didn't get to say anything. We should acknowledge that there are 5 criteria. We've heard testimony in the case of each one of them that the situation meets the criteria in terms of the honest error, the time it happened, the difficulty in moving the building, and so on. So I think we've heard all those things. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The the equitable waiver is granted. Do I hear a motion to approve the draft minutes from last month?
So moved.
Who was the second?
Who was the second on that? I know it was Mr. Wallner.
It's me.
Thank you.
Motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? A motion on the findings of fact.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any other business to come before us tonight?
I do have
Thank you.
two brief items. Something that's been carried over from Tracy is the board does need to renominate you as chair. I think it's always happened automatically.
No, it already happened.
Oh, for the chair? I'm sorry, it says election of chair on here, so I thought.
Yeah, I mentioned it to her a couple of months ago, and she said, I'll take care of that, and then
I'm
she
sorry.
quit.
I was just going to continue it on because I didn't realize it already happened.
You can take it off.
We've already tied him down and told him he's never leaving.
Yeah.
And then, once the meeting's closed, I just want to have a different discussion, not legal, just an interpretation of a hardship.
Okay. Is there a motion to close the
So moved.
meeting? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I think it's closed.
Well done.